amogela mo Daily Thetha. Let's about every Monday to Thursday at 11 a.m. Of course, discussing all the issues. As Baswa, we of course the youth that are taking charge, and as opposed to Kini, we are actually deciding or debating the issues affect. So I think that's why it's important for the very first time in SABC's broadcasting history, two youth shows they're on one platform, Daily Thetha, of course in the form of one day leader and Daily Thetha debating issues as Baswa. And I think it's important about the first motion we'll be debating today between the two teams. Of course, it says for the House, of course, it supported the motion. Mob justice is the correct form of law enforcement.
Job seshilo nje uTum ukuthi youth taking charge la ku Daily Thetha sihlanganisa ama shows amabili wathandayo and sikhiphe something ulozolo le show. Namhlanje ke the second motion azobe debater ukuthi sikholela ekutheni ukuthi thina njengamaningizimu Afrika singakwazi ukushare izinto nomnotho wala ningizimu Afrika nabanye abantu bangaphandle. So it's so simple for you. Give us a call on 011-339-1315 or go to Facebook daily_Thetha and na ku Twitter as well daily_Thetha, Instagram daily Thetha_SABC1.
Well, let's meet of course the leaders debating, two representing Daily Thetha and two representing one day leader. But of course for the two candidates represent Daily Thetha, William Shoki and of course Lindo Guhle Mabaso, and of course representing team one day leader Mr. Sydney Mabo and of course Lebo Mpela.
And also nama adjudicators wethu ahlukahlukena nje soqala from ladies first here Ayanda Bandla or entrepreneur Ayanda Sukamukele. As well as we also have Ukashwal Brooks, communications coordinator for South African Human Rights Commission. Ukashwal, welcome to Daily Thetha. And also Bongani Masela, the director of debating and public speaking at Shimong. Sukamukele baba.
A round of applause, of course. Kini adjudicators. I also think it's important let's start with every debating. We can't just come and do as we please. So let's of course give you the rules of debating today. Please note the style of debating give the British parliamentary style of debating. So let me give you of course the rules of debate today so you understand. So of course we have two individuals as we've mentioned, and representing the teams. The first speaker has of course 3 minutes to state their case, and the first minute will be uninterrupted. Sure. So it means for the opposition party, or rather opposition side, has of course the second minute engage to give their points of information, and the opposition side again allowed only 2 points of information, which we term the POI of course in debating jargon. Now they may only last for 15 seconds, so it's a short space of time, but they need to act very quickly, and with those POIs the speakers are then allowed to probe the speaker's speech and their case while representing their speech, and once their two POIs are gone, well, they can no longer interrupt the other side. Aring Papojong and Garabuya, we're starting with our very first debate. You're watching Daily Thetha on SABC1 Mzansi for sure, and if you've just joined us, well, of course we're making broadcasting history on SABC, where we're having two programs, One Day Leader and Daily Thetha, of course debating the issues as Moswa. And we did mention before the ad break, we have two motions will be debating, and the first motion, just in case you've missed out, will be of course discussing whether or not mob justice is a legitimate form of law enforcement. And team Daily Thetha will be the proposition side, and team One Day Leader will be opposing. Now later on of course in the show we'll also be having another motion debater, and it's about whether or not South Africa has a moral obligation to share the resources and opportunities with foreign nationals residing in South Africa. A little bit later on, but we have the first of course motion. Team Daily Thetha of course is the house that supports the motion.
And kuzoba kanjalo ke isikhathi sihamba kanje u3 minutes umuntu eyi1 ngathi iminute lokuqala ukwazi ukuthi uphazamiseke, then masoqedile lapho sengafaka ama POIs okhona ukwazi ukuthi uqhubeke nenkulumo. Isikhathi sakhona team Daily Thetha, are you ready?
Yes.
Isikhathi sakho siqala manje. Let's go.
2017 marks 20 years since the Constitution came into force in 1997. But 20 years later, for the majority of South Africans, justice still remains inaccessible, still remains something that you can only access if you are in a position of privilege. if you have the resources, if you live in a community in which your police force is even efficient to begin with. Now, this can't be justice, and whilst some of us might think that mob justice and vigilantism is the real crime, the biggest crime is a government that can't provide for its people the most basic service. What do we mean here? Ultimately, when we think about government, we have to think about it as a contract, where we as citizens give our powers and liberties to government so that they can ultimately look after us. And one of the most important human rights that exists for everyone is the right to safety, to be protected in your homes, as a black woman, to feel like you can walk down the streets. And if that doesn't exist, I'll take you in a moment, sir, then we think that when you're forced in a situation to take it into your hands because the government is failing, then that is ultimately morally permissible.
Point of information.
Yes.
So, William, are you saying that it's permissible for people to be necklaced, soaked in paraffin, and set alight in the name of preserving justice for the society?
So obviously that is the most extreme example where in many instances, when people take justice into their hands, they don't resort to killing them. They don't resort to torturing them. But as communities, people want to interrogate why this is occurring. People want the people who have committed the crimes to be rehabilitated back into their communities. The only reason that exists in the first place is because our police force is so ineffective, because our court systems are so ineffective. And we think there is a culture in which citizens
Point of information.
active. No, thank you, sir. We think that ultimately we're going to have a justice system that is more responsive to people. And we accept there might be instances in the beginning in which it is violent, but what that will be is a wake-up call to the government to take action, to try and reform the system so that it can remain accessible to people. Because ultimately, morally, we have to say that if the government is not providing for you, then there's no reason for you to respect laws that don't even serve your interests in the first place. And that is why on a moral level, we have to say it's permissible, because this justice needs to be provided for everyone. Children need to feel when they're living in the Cape Flats that they can walk to school without being intervened or without experiencing a gun battle. We think that 20 years later, we need to ask ourselves, does this justice system actually work for the people? Are the opening words, we the people, actually true to the people of the country? And we think if not, then it's time for us as the people to take charge.
Interesting debate there.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Team Daily Thetha and Team One Day Leader. Interesting.
Team One Day Leader, and now it's Katsaka Sokala kuna manje je une minute that you can go ungaphazamiswanga, and then after that singaqala ukuthi afaka ma POIs wake, and your 3 minutes starts right now.
Right, so it's a very beautiful argument that the proposition proposes, right? But it is fundamentally flawed, and we're going to prove to you why. So when he speaks about how the judicial system is only for some and only for a few privileged, he's also saying in essence that the Constitution of South Africa is only to the benefit of some, and this is a constitution that each and every single one of us in this house has access to and gains equal enjoyment from. What he's also doing by misleading the house is by being devoid of the fact that 89% of conviction rates from the National Prosecuting Authority. So it's false when he says that only a few people enjoy the benefits from the state. I do not know where William, if he has ever come across a situation of mob justice, but I can tell you from the townships that I come from, it's not all good and dandy where you steal something from someone and they say, but you did something wrong. You are set alight. You are beaten with a spade. You are literally killed. And that is the reality of mob justice in South Africa. I'll give you a minute. If you go to our rural areas, if you go to our informal settlements, that is what mob justice equates to. It equates to violence. And the Constitution of this republic stipulates that each and every single South African has a right to safety, has freedom of security, and has a right not to be harmed in any violent manner. William?
That's the very problem of justice in this country. When we think of people who are really taking justice into their own hands, the only stereotype we can provide is painting them as animals, as people who are savages, who are always going to necklace people when that isn't the reality.
William is misleading this house. The question that I would then ask you, as a leader in this country, as a young leader in this country, are you saying that it is permissible to lace someone with a tire, soak them in paraffin, and burn them alive? Yes. Because, ladies and gentlemen, that is the reality of the country that we live in. Now, in our townships and informal settlements, as well as our rural areas, the true realities of mob justice have not been fundamentally argued by William. The question around unlawful killing of alleged criminals to an informal justice system is not cognizant of the principle of innocent until proven guilty. And that, in essence, is what our legal system seeks to promote. How do we promote a constitution for all when we allow it to protect some? What kind of South Africa promotes violence, whereas it is born from violence? Mob justice does not account, mob justice is not transparent, and mob justice is not fair. We need to respect and uphold our constitution by ensuring that it is functional in the adjudicating and fair treatment of all citizens. If a child from the Cape Flats tomorrow is to commit a crime, are we really going to say that mob justice is the way to go, even though we know the living circumstances of gang violence in the Cape Flats? I submit.
Sure. Wow. Interesting debate. Thank you so much, Team One Day Leader. Thank you so much, Team Daily Thetha. I'm sure you're actually making your decision, even our adjudicators actually listened very attentively. Hashtag Daily Thetha. We want to hear from you. Is it Team Daily Thetha or Team One Day Leader? Before we asked, of course, of course, in the society, there's violence, there is mob justice in South Africa. Some people are taking matters into their own hands. And of course, some of the foreign nationals rather, in South Africa. The question is, the violence in South Africa, is it xenophobia or is it Afrophobia?
The term xenophobia, ngicabanga ukuthi liya-abuswa because noma sokhuluma izinto ezamaqiniso uvela ulabel ukuthi xenophobic.
This is not xenophobia because if you look at the standard dictionary definition of xenophobia, it refers to a fear of foreigners.
It seems as if seliyuzwa against South African uma ngabe asikho happy ngento ezithile. You know, whenever you say abantu bokufika bayaganga, but you are xenophobic.
Afrophobia is I think more appropriate. Therefore we should call it Afrophobia.
Kunezinto abazenzayo esingazithandi. Sine right ukusho kanjalo because this is our country. Asizange thina sihambe siye emazweni wabo sifike simoshe.
It's not all foreigners who are being subjected to these attacks. It's mainly, you know, African nationals. This
violence it's about our resources. You know, if there was enough for everybody, I don't think there'll be a conflict. So it's a battle for resources, be it hospital, be it education, be it jobs. So, and as a result,
we should not blame the symptom. In other words, we should not blame foreign nationals struggling with us in the community, but we should blame the conditions of black people whom have not changed. Remember, we were promised in 1994 that we shall have a better life for all. We have not seen that, but what we see is that a large number of black people continues to suffer.
We never had problem, ngabo. You know, during apartheid, you know, because bebafika labanga jonji, bebengezi ngama-drugs, bebangafiki la benza bosisi bethu ama-prostitute, bebafika nje sikubudlelwane bu-right nje sihlale sonke.
If we understood what colonialization, apartheid and racism did to us, we would treat our fellow Africans, you know, quite differently because we would understand that they are not responsible.
Umuntu makafika la abuze ukuthi uzokwenzani. Mangabe uzofunda isikole afunda isikole. You know, mangabe unama-skill skills, azinawo ama-skill skills, asifundise lezi zinto esingenazo. Sifunde kuyo, then i-Africa idlondlobala.
The reasons why they are here are exactly the same as why, you know, we were leaving the country during apartheid. We were facing persecution, we were under war. And we felt it's justified for us to leave the country and go to our neighbors.
We mustn't be fooled. These people who welcomed, people who left for exile, are the very same people who are coming in here. These are not Thomas Sankara. These are not Petrus Lumumba. These people who are coming here, they're not coming here to assist us. They're coming here to outcompete us, to outshine, to outwit us.
Yes, it is true because the countries that we went to made sure that their citizens are not vulnerable. So you could not go there and undermine the citizen. But when you come here, la Mzansi, it's the other way around. The citizens are already vulnerable. So whoever comes from the outside finds us already on the floor. and they step on us.
I mean, you look at the country, efana ne Zimbabwe, the country efana ne Botswana, the country efana na Lesotho, the country efana na Angola, Namibia, or Congo. They cannot claim to have liberated themselves. South Africans were also involved. In fact, ANC and the PAC, they spend more time fighting outside than fighting here inside.
What I think is a solution, or rather the solution for me lies in attaining justice. Justice not only for our fellow brothers who are coming outside of this border territory known as South Africa, but justice for black people in the majority.
Ngamanje sesingena kwesibili because into la ekhaya ihamba ngenye indlela kuqala amajita kugcina abantu besifazane so sesithi ladies
21st century, ne?
and this house house one day leader but believe akakhona ukuthi ama South Africa we are morally obliged ukuthi share ama resources wethu nama opportunities nabantu bangaphandle kwaseningizimu Africa. I don't know ukuthi kuzowenzakalani njalo sizozo debate ke at home as well, be part of this ukwazi ukusitshela ukuthi wena ucabangana about debate yakhona so masiqede ekugcineni so bese sazi ukuthi abantu babona kanjani.
Okay, Niti, I think one day leader, you're ready? Alrighty, ma'am. Your 3 minutes. You may begin.
How can the very same nations that we as sisters not receive our assistance in their time of need? How can we not be morally obligated to help our brothers and our sisters? Don't tell me about a Nigerian national or a Zambian national. Tell me about people, actual human beings. Thus, we believe that South Africans are morally obligated to share their resources and opportunities with foreign nationals. By South Africa, we mean the state. By moral obligation, we mean the qualified mandate by the government to take care of its people. By resources, we mean food, safety, and sanitation. And by opportunities, we mean the right to legally participate in the economy. Let's go back to our trying times in SA, apartheid. We had our freedom fighters going to African state, seeking refuge, seeking help to find solidarity with regards to how we can better our situation. They then came back to improve our issue, to lead our country. As Africans, we demand black excellence, but how do we achieve that if we cannot drive a common cause, if we cannot have a common identity? I'll be with you in a minute. So let's try to think of this in a way where we need to find a way to create an Africanism type of notion. It is less about what we have and more about what emotionally and on a moral basis, what we can provide for the next person. What message are we pushing across if we are saying, leave our country, we cannot help you? What happens to the woman out there who is not able to take care of her child, but she's from Zambia, for example, and she gets to SA? Are we saying there's no water for her? Are we saying there's no safety? Are we saying there's no food for her? What happens then? Yes.
Ma'am, in the particular context of our country where the majority of our population, by majority I mean 80%, are still struggling to get access to those things that the very same resource other people want, then how far do we say that this moral obligation actually exists?
It is not about the opportunities, it's about how they're distributed, number one, and number two, it's about male administration. It has nothing to do with the opportunities or the resources. It has more to do with how it is distributed and how we pretty much are given each opportunity as people. Now, also, as a pointer, I have a fellow colleague here who's one of the strongest leaders I know, Anisa Mazimpaka. She is from Rwanda, and in 1996, her family came here to seek refuge. And today, she sits here helping students in South Africa find ways to pay for their fees, find ways to... So are we saying that if she is a foreign national, she has got no right to be helping us with problems here? We have to effectively find ways to work together to help each other. We need to demand black excellence. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Team One Day Leader. Of course, you are the proposition side. Team Daily Thetha, you are the opposition side. Are you ready to debate?
Yes.
All right, let's put in the clock. Your 3 minutes begin now.
What we need to understand about moral obligation, that it's more than just about our values. Moral obligation incorporates whether or not we have the capacity to help individuals. It incorporates whether or not pursuing that moral obligation actually brings good results. Now, in the current context of our country, in post-apartheid South Africa, where we're still struggling to abolish the inequalities that were brought by the apartheid system, where we also are struggling to fight the inequitable distribution of resources that are already limited, our moral obligation to other individuals individuals rather becomes difficult. But now what is particularly important to understand is that before anyone else, individuals and countries have a moral obligation to themselves. In the context of South Africa, where individuals are still being displaced, where people still don't have houses and we're still fighting for land reformation, where we still have not well, resourced public institutions like hospitals and schools, where we're still fighting problems of inflation, where our poor are constantly impoverished by high prices of food and they can't afford the basic standard of living, would say that there's an injustice. But what's particularly problematic is the fact that the state, which is the one that they're telling us has the resources, is the one that's also failing our own people. So the state here isn't the one necessarily that's carrying the moral obligation. The moral obligation lies with the people who are also impoverished, right? But now that we've actually established that, we'd therefore tell you that South Africa's moral obligation to foreign nationalities is not necessarily that, I'll take you in a moment, of sharing resources equitably, but it is that of not inflicting harm upon them. But now in the particular context of this South Africa, we tell you that the problem is that because we have limited resources and opportunities, if we're actually going to share them with foreign nationalities, they're not going to be shared equitably. I'll take you in a moment. We're only going to have a trade-off between South Africans and other nationalities. The problem with this is that because they are minorities, they can easily be just disregarded as the other.
Point of information.
I'll take you in a moment. They can easily be just demonized and actually told to go back to their foreign countries because they passively held accountable for our problems. Before I proceed, yes.
When you talk about distribution, what does that have to do with how we share? Look, we can have what we have as South Africans, but how does that affect any person who needs the essential resources? Someone who is here with regards to looking for refuge, if there's a war happening somewhere within Africa and someone is here looking for refuge, how?
Today, if foreign nationalities come to South Africans and they say, why aren't you providing me with food or a house? South Africans are going to say, what food? With what house? Because I'm struggling to get the same. So the problem is that there just isn't enough for everyone. But now, the question then becomes, when can we still fulfill our obligation to help foreign nationalities? And it is simply when we have the resources, because that way we have the capacity to help. Why this is particularly important is that it takes away the legitimacy of South Africans who are capable to say, no, I don't want to help you. Foreign nationalities can hold them accountable if they can help them. With all of that, I
Thank you so much, Team Adjudicator. All right. Team Adjudicator and Team One Leader, very thought-provoking issues selengorobadiraisa, hey?
Kuthanda kuba nzima kakhulu mawusekhaya njengamanje na ubhekile siyakhuluma futhi na ku Facebook na ku Twitter sitshela ukuthi ucabangani and nakhona la endlini nje audience yethu izositshela ukuthi bona ngokubona kwabo ubani owinile nama adjudicators wethu ngiyabona apha la phansi ngathi sengibonile ukuthi ubani owinile kodwa so bona basibuye breakini.
Lilibelechi Daily Thetha gona mo gae mo SABC 1 Mzansi for sure. Lokhonile, we're having two programs, One Day Leader and Daily Thetha, debating issues selling gore di amana na le wena as moswa. Of course, we had two motions selling gore debater, and of course the first motion re banya go tseba more about mob justice, whether or not it's a legitimate force of law enforcement gona mo gae mo South Africa, and the second motion eleng gore re debate, of course, nearly about the moral obligation or not eleng gore South Africa has in sharing resources and opportunities in South Africa. I'm hoping you're hashtagging Daily Thetha and voting for your favorite team, whether it's Team ODL or Team DT. Marafela, we need to come back to the adjudicators. They've been listening and have some sort of an opinion about which team. So, Kashwa, we'll start with you. What did you think of both debates so far?
Look, both debates were excellent. I think that the first debate, what I would have liked to hear is in terms of how practically this is going to work, especially from the proposition side. From a legal perspective, how do you get away with people being able to take the law into their own hands? There was a slight issue around logic as well that I was a bit concerned by, because I think the point that was made was that this is how the authorities then see. They take this issue seriously because they see communities acting up and therefore they intervene. Although this has been an ongoing trend in South Africa and therefore by now the authorities should have seen. So I was just a bit concerned with the logic on that particular one. When it came to the other side in terms of their response to this particular issue, there was a reliance on the Constitution, but I think that I would have liked to see a little more of reliance in terms of due process and a focus on due process. I think that was missing in the debate. In terms of the second debate, I thought it was just as equally entertaining, just as equally, emphatic on issues.
Right.
What I would have liked to see there is maybe a little more of an indication of what is the contribution of foreign nationals in South Africa from the proposition side.
Right.
So that we don't have this notion of people just taking and taking, because realistically speaking, foreign nationals actually add a lot to the economy, to the general South African community as a whole. So I would have liked to have seen that a little more. On the other hand, I was looking at the issue of, I was a bit concerned that the opposition, and please take this in the kindest possible way, it was bordering on populist, in that, you know, the usual arguments in terms of why foreign nationals are not welcome and why there's competition was being highlighted, the scramble for resources, etc., etc. What the issue should have been is maybe to show us then, how do we limit those? Do we limit them outright? Do we say that, look, you're not given the right to housing, you're not given the right to education, etc., etc., or do we limit some of the rights?
Right.
Why? Maybe, you know, highlighting a little more in detail. But I guess a 3-minute speech is a short space of time, and that's why I'm going to give both teams a little more latitude.
Thank you so much, Ash. Well,
asizokena ayanda ukuthi wena uthini i-comment yakho ma?
Yeah, I mean, it's close to what Gershon was saying. I mean, if I'm looking at the discussion on the access to opportunities and resources for foreign nationals, I think we need to interrogate to what extent do foreign nationals actually access opportunity and resources, and at what level in this country, and at what expense it is to the South African or to the government of South Africa. Because if we're looking at a lot of foreign nationals, we'd have to look at what status they're into this country, asylum seeking, for refugee, of to which NGOs actually play a part in supporting those foreign nationals in foreign countries. So you'd actually have to draw a line and in actually establishing to what extent they're actually impairing the South African from receiving their own resources from their own country. So it's kind of like, you know, we're not clear on that. But I would have also liked to hear a lot more from Team Wonder Leader, how they suppose practically these resources can be shared. Yes, they did touch on it, on the fact that, you know, it's unequal distribution of the already existing resources. So if we actually fix that, we could actually be able to accommodate everyone else. But I would have liked to see more as to how we can do that. But with regards to the first topic of mob justice, also I was quite, you know, afraid of the logic that was presented by Team Hetha, because if we're going to look at levels of violence and we're going to say that it's what they're proposing is extremist, there's nothing simple or logical or rational about mob justice. It is automatically going to move towards irrationalism and extremism, which is why we'll see necklacing, we'll see people being beaten half to death, because when you get to an issue of mob justice, there's nothing rational about it. How we would to actually police the issues of mob justice is what I would have liked to hear more from Team One Day Leader, how we would actually regulate, and we shouldn't even be regulating it if you ask me, how we should actually be more reliant on what is already an existing policing system in the country and support that, as opposed to creating a different one altogether.
Interesting. All right, Bongani, I know Khurwena, it's interesting because you're also a university, you know, African champion. But as a full-time uncle to Utsiamo, I mean, what do you make of the debate today?
I think both of them were very socially impactful, and just to comment on the first one, because like it is ukuthi bantu bemphakathi basuke bacabangani mabenda letindo lekungusasidvisisi kulimatana kushisana njalo njalo, and it puts you in the mind of someone who participates in mob justice and why it is that they resort to it. So I think with the first debate, the issues from the prop side is that we should have gotten a clarification of how we prevent the most extreme violent actions around mob justice. And I think that was the burden. In order for the prop side to get away with justifying mob justice, you'd need to show us how people's rights and dignity would not necessarily be compromised. However, on the op side, I did feel that the idea that all South Africans have access to the institution, to the constitution, was insufficient, because the proposition's point is very valid in saying that the majority of South Africans don't have access to courts and good lawyers, and those are the instruments that you need to access the best of the constitution, which a lot of South Africans unfortunately don't have, and they resort to mob violence. He mentioned the example of people who walk to school and, you know, walk at night, and what do they resort to when the police force is not interested? With the second debate, I think in South Africa, a country that struggles with Pan-Africanism, it was very pertinent to understand what South Africa's place is in Africa. So I would have liked to get a bit a few more arguments around that. However, the arguments that we got were very strong in a sense that balancing moral obligation and moral capacity is very, very important. So the idea that South Africa does owe Africans, but how far can we go towards, assisting people who've come here looking for refuge and so on and so on. And so, yeah, I don't know. We'll get the result later on.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah.
To me is that a team Delegator and a team one day leader bahamsana nabantu babo bebefuna ukubuza ama questions bebuza befuna ukuyibuza and ubone ukuthi bayabila ngaphakathi khona ama questions abafuna ukubuza. So let's give them a chance ukuthi bebuze only 2 questions and then this team team Delegator nayo was tipendula and sinikeza na ithuba as well ukuthi kwazi ukuqhubela phambili. Ubani kama mfethu and your question.
Sakile Mgadi, one day leader. I was quite taken aback by William in the sense that we think he's deceived South Africans, right? So we tell you, like, you deceive South Africans when you paint a picture of mob justice being a rosy affair done by rational people. You don't tell us that it is a group of people who feel angered and aggrieved by the fact that someone has infringed upon them and decide to take the law into their own hands. Where's the fairness in this? Where's the accountability in this when that person is killed? You're right, you don't explain any of that. I think you need to take a taxi maybe to a township and see a mob in action. The word here is mob. It's not group justice. It's not team justice. It's a mob. It's a very violent group of people with very violent intentions, right? And we don't see an acknowledgement of that on your behalf.
All right then. Comment Motomwe from Team Delegator.
Okay, so I think this is a very valid question, and I'm going to be willing to tackle this by its head. If you think about mob justice and actually ponder it for a moment, it's actually consistent with our constitution, because our constitution provides provision for people who are in situations where they can't access police to react self-defensively. So my question is, what is the difference between a robber entering the home of someone who lives in Sandton and that person resorting to shooting that robber versus a community in Kutsong who has been ravaged by gang violence, who's been ravaged by rapists, and them equally choosing to take that justice into their own hands and react to those criminals? There is a double standard there, because we're very happy to paint black people as savages when they're the ones taking justice into their own hands. But in the other instance, why is it different in that sense, is my question.
Interesting.
Question number 2. Second question.
All right.
All right, so we were absolutely perturbed by the fact that your entire argument around the sharing of our resources constitutionally completely contradicts who we are and where we are. First of all, the Freedom Charter states that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. And with that said, Nelson Mandela once said that human rights will be the light that guides our foreign affairs. So how do you intend to uphold the very argument that you have made without infringing on the constitutional promise that we made to our people over 2 decades ago?
I think what's important to understand is that if we would opt for sharing our resources and our opportunities with comrades from other countries, because we can't say that they are the other. The problem necessarily with that is that we wouldn't exactly achieve any progressive change. Because if we're in an instance where we have limited, because that's an unfortunate and very sick reality, that we don't have enough. If we were to opt for a situation where we would share with them, we would just have a majority of South Africans and comrades from other African countries still not having enough. So that obligation can't be fulfilled even if we would want to share our resources with those individuals.
Alrighty then. Thank you so much, Team One Day Leader. Team Daily Thetha, thank you so much. Linali Diputisho Telengoro you'd also like to ask to Team One Day Leader. All right, share the mic, please.
All right, my name is Mzansi. I'm with the Daily Thetha team. The issue that I have with the first debate, especially coming from the opposition side, is that they create a false rhetoric and a false context, in that it's not about the justice system and mob justice. It's about the justice system and nothing. People can't access the justice system necessarily because, number one, there's no police force in that area. Number two, even in the instances where there is a police force, they aren't adequate in dealing with these issues. And number three, even in the instance where you could say that the government should have the monopoly over violence in terms of the SAPS, the government does not have the monopoly over justice. We tell you that in the Constitution it is enshrined that self-defense and self-preservation is extremely important. We can see this in case law in the way that it plays out, where the Sandton man can shoot a robber. robber. And we tell you that in that instance, it is constitutionally sound to say that mob justice is something that's acceptable. But I'll take it even further. Mob justice is not only necessarily people acting out in the most violent or extreme ways. We can see it in Johannesburg, we see it in Mitchell's Plain, where groups of people get together and don't necessarily kill, but do punish people through things like restorative justice, like they do in Johannesburg, and things like even punishing them in a physical manner by, like, you know, giving them lashes on the back or whatever. We tell you that in that instance, that violence isn't as extreme as killing people, and it still gets the same outcome as having the monopoly on violence, where we get things like police brutality, where we get things like people being pulled at the back of police cars. We tell you in that instance it's fair.
Let's give, of course, Team One Leader a chance to
Hey,
respond.
what a mouthful. I will try to come to. The account I would give you is a personal account of someone who's been in a rural area and saw someone's head be bashed in using a spade, right? So the impression that you are giving us is that it is correct for violence to be used as a measure of enforcement. And what I'm saying to you is that even though not each and every single South African has access to a court, each and every single South African does have a right to life, does have a right to be safe, does have a right to be secured. And finally, I think the argument around there not really being a thriving justice system is a bit unfair, because I would want for you to prove that. As someone who's currently going in and out of court for Fees Must Fall protests, we are seeing actively how students that burned auditoriums are being held to task. So you need to prove to us that we don't have a thriving legal system. I told you, NPA, 89.9% of convictions. Prove to me that that is not the case.
Sure.
Usabukela iDaily Thetha no SABC 1 Mzansi for sure, and uzwele ukuthi khamba kanjani, so masibuya back sizathola ama results ukuthi na iphi team enze kahle, team Daily Thetha or team One Day Leader. Siyabuya after this.
Deliberate Daily Thetha gona mo gae mo SABC 1 Mzansi for sure. If you want to join Mata, well, you've missed out on 4 segments whereby we had, of course, Team One Day Leader and Team Daily Thetha ba leng gore ne ba debate about the issues tse leng gore di affecta baswa gona byanong 2017 rena as baswa we are, of course, taking charge and re decide gore re bolela ka tsona, re debate re boneng gore ke eng di solutions tse leng gore ka di bya mo tafuleng. Well, before the ad break though, let's ba ga gore Team Daily Thetha ne butche e one to Team One Day Leader. We owe them one more question e leng gore ba ka butcha Team One Day Leader. So if anybody already go butcha puchisho, you may go ahead.
Oh, okay. So what I wanted to say is that South Africa has one of the most relaxed immigration laws in Africa, and that's why most people resort to migrating in South Africa. So there is an attempt from the South African government to fulfill the moral obligation that exists. But then the problem becomes with like practically implementing and extending things so that it benefits everyone, even your own citizens. What they don't really engage in is the reality, and that's like what most people talk about, and it's what most people can't respond to, because that's the reality. Practically, how do you successfully make sure that everyone is catered for? Because like principally speaking, the moral obligation is being fulfilled by like even taking in immigrants, even though they aren't entering the country in like the acceptable way.
Interesting.
I think part of what we saw in the insert is that oftentimes the people who bear the harm, the most harm of Afrophobia and xenophobia, are Black people. And we should transcend our national identity as South Africans and begin to ask ourselves, why is it the case that in the 1990s, post the democratic government, as a white person, you could get double citizenship from the UK, and you could still hold your citizenship in South Africa, and you could also get that in Australia. And you can see the kind of camaraderie that the colonial powers have for their own. And we are sitting here debating our moral obligation for Black people. And I think that's what it comes down to, is that yes, we may not have enough, but as Black people, we only have each other, and our moral obligation will extend as so far as it is needed. And so long as it is needed, we will continue to extend ourselves as far as we can go as South Africans, as Black people, as Africans, to the diaspora, those who are abroad, and to those who are on the African continent, quite frankly.
Well, interesting. Round of applause to you, Anna. Thank you so much for that comment. But you know what? I think this needs another, round of question and answer. I think we need to also get the gist of just, the points both teams are making. So, Team Delegator, we're going to give you another chance, as well as Team One Day Leader, to ask and answer a question. So, Team Delegator, if you have another question to ask, or Team One Day Leader, what's your question?
Right. So, I think a very important thing to mention here is the fact especially around the second debate, we have to consider the availability of resources in the country, right? First of all, we have to then consider to whom does the state dispense these resources to first, right? If you're in Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital and there are 100 beds available for birth, and there are many different demographics that need to give birth in that space, who does Chris Hani Baragwanath has a moral obligation to giving those resources to? That's the first issue here, right? And I think if you consider the fact that we are limited in the resources that we have, right? So our moral capacity is completely limited in us outrightly fulfilling a full moral obligation to the people that come from different countries. I think the limitation here must be taken into consideration very seriously. Talk to the limitation. We really do understand the fact that we have to be Pan-African, we have to be welcoming. But what about instances where we are truly, truly limited in what we can dispense out to the people?
Arifeng, Team One Day Leader, a chance to respond?
First of all, thank you, Tommy, for that. First of all, if the baby is born at Baragwanath Hospital, even though the mother's foreign, the baby's South African. But what I'd wanted to answer, actually just more generally to your question, is I have a problem with the perception that your team generally has of what foreign national means. Because the first foreign nationals that came to this country were white. And we gave them land. And now when our own brothers and sisters come here, we don't want to give them water, we don't want to give them food, basic healthcare services. I think we need to reconsider ourselves and reconsider what it means. Because I think these foreign national laws and immigrant laws are actually anti-African and anti-black, and we need to look into that.
Thank you so much.
Before just let's give Team One Day Leaders one more question, and then we go to our result to just find out exactly our adjudicators way to end the ganjani ku ma result Masasbega.
Okay, thank you very much. This one goes back to mob justice. First of all, Team Daily Thetha, you failed to define mob justice. You're telling us about a robbery. That is not a mob. It's an individual person. Listen, we live in a constitutional democracy, right? And let me just remind you again, as you reminded us, that this constitution that was here 20 years ago, it's what we abide by. And by virtue of you being here in South Africa means that you abide by this very same constitution. You cannot be telling me that we use the same constitution to fight for free quality education, but yet you're compromising the safety of another person. So unless, again, you're thinking of coming up with your own constitution 200 years from now, sharpke. But for now, we work according to you are innocent until proven guilty. And if you all were reading the news, you will realize that a few days ago, someone was necklaced. That's mob justice. Mob justice ends in violence. You don't tap someone's wrist when mob justice is committed. Don't deceive the nation. So again, what authority do we have based on the fact that this guy was murdered by a mob? What authority do we have that he actually committed what he was accused of? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Team One Day Leader. Team Daily Thetha.
Just a quick one.
Sorry. Yeah. Once again, it's not about the judicial system and mob justice. It's about mob justice or nothing. We tell you that it's extremely important that you consider the context in which this happens. It's not the rural area where people have access to the SAPS. It's in the place where people don't have access to justice, period. In that instance, it's completely justifiable for people to dispense justice. The reason why is social contract theory, and what our constitution is based on, is the dispensation of justice for people who buy or do not buy into the social contract. As soon as you don't buy into the social contract, you can afford justice on that person. And we tell you that it's completely justified on a principled level to do that, but even practically, the only time that you hear about mob justice is when someone gets necklaced. It's not when somebody gets lashed or somebody gets punished in other ways. We tell you that even though it's violent, it's effective, and people need to protect themselves.
All right. Thank you so much, Delegator. Interesting. Alrighty then, Adjudicator, and you bear, of course, the final answer of who actually want to impress you rather in those two debates.
Okay, I think ultimately, just to understand that the decision is not based on the comments, but the merit of the debate itself and what the debaters said. And my result is broken up into two, and then I'll give you the ultimate one afterwards. So the first debate I give to opposition, right? So team one day leader. And the reason for that is because of the practicalities of how extreme violence gets, which the first speaker on this side should have clarified. But for the second debate, I feel there wasn't enough engagement on the linking of moral capacity and moral obligation. And so I felt that that was possibly one of the strongest arguments in today's debate. And because the first one was a rather close one, and with the second one I found it to be an easier decision, I ultimately give the decision, the result to Daily Thetha as a result of that. So that's how I decided the result.
So for you, who actually won?
Daily Thetha.
Oh, interesting. Right, 1 point to Daily Thetha.
Yeah, let's go to Ayanda.
Well, I'm not going to split my decision. I'm just going to look at the holistic debate. And for me, I'd have to give my vote to Team One Day Leader for both debates, because with both debates there are so many fundamentally inconsistent and incorrect claims made by Team Daily Thetha. I mean, for my gentleman over there to come with a medical example and say if a baby is born in Baragwanath, you know, where would the health service go? Firstly, the medical profession, the health fraternity has an obligation to look at who needs a service and is urgent at that point in time. So it's not about whether you're black or white or African or Nigerian. It's about who is really in dire need of that health service. And if you happen to Zimbabwe and at that point in time, you will be attended to. So there are just so many fundamentally inconsistent claims. You're innocent until you are proven guilty, and that is a law in this country, and you cannot take a law into your own hands. That is why communities can take a stand and form community policing forums to assist in policing communities, not to be mob justice or to take the law into their own hands. So my vote goes to Team One Day Leader.
Team One Day Leader, you have 1 point. Joshua, I guess you have the deciding vote.
The point that I want to make is that unfortunately, the initial discrepancy in logic that I had with you saying that, you know, communities would obviously act out and then the authorities would take the requisite action, I still think that that hasn't been dealt with. A slippery slope has been also created in that you've likened private defense with mob justice, and those are two very different things, both in terms of the law as well as in terms of the Constitution in general. And I think that as being with the South African Human Rights Commission, I think we have to clarify that. Because otherwise people do feel that they have this right because they don't have access to justice. And then that these issues need to be dealt with differently. So I just wanted to put that out there as a disclaimer. Second to that, I do think that, yes, I do agree that there was, the second debate was very interesting around the issue of obviously how do we deal with foreign nationals. I think both teams didn't necessarily confine it to a definition that told us how do we practically implement it. And that is why even during the question and answer session, it then became about 100 beds versus 101 or 102 people at Baragwanath, right? So that was what makes it difficult. But because I think that this was the team that was the closest aligned with giving a solid argument, a more logical argument, also looking at our constitutional paradigm, which I think we can't cast away, my vote has to go to Team One Day Leader.
All righty. A round of applause. Team One Day Leader takes that round. Congratulations to you, Team One Day Leader. Thank you so much to Team Daily Thetha, of course, for also being great opponents. And yeah, that is it. That's our debate, of course. Team One Day Leader, Team Daily Thetha, of course, coming together right here on SABC 1.
Ungakhohlwa futhi ukuthi siyaqhubeka izinto zethu on Facebook naku Twitter go there daily_SABC1 on Facebook naku Twitter daily_SABC1. If you are on Instagram, Daily Thetha, so besibonane futhi.
Bye bye.
Siyabonga.